So now going into the demo of what is new in this release 3.2 of the LemonTree.Connect for Codebeamer. I have set up a project. So I have an enterprise architect project. I have 3 trackers: system requirements, customer requirements, and the system architecture. So the first 2 packages will be used for import. This package will be used for export. On the Codebeamer side, I have this tracker with system requirements. So what I will do is I will import from Codebeamer. So if I now start the import, you can see the mapping user interface slightly looks a little bit different. So this is immediately what you see, what we changed here. So this portion of the user interface has been improved and extended. So now we have different categories for the different element types. So we have element, link, and diagram. The rest basically stayed the same. You also see there is a baseline. This is also has been added. So for the Codebeamer project, I'm choosing this project here. Then for the tracker, I will choose the system requirements. For the mapping template, this stayed the same. I can, for example, use this requirement mapping and load it into the user interface. I have one element mapping rule. And what I also can now do is I can add a link rule. So here I have access to the Codebeamer link fields and the enterprise architect link types. For this, I will now use the dependency and then save this and start the import. And as you can see here, import is finished. I have functional requirements and non-functional requirements. And I also get placeholders. The placeholders are created because I configured a link to be imported. The link is coming from the customer requirement fields. And if I switch to Codebeamer, I can show you where this link points. So if I, for example, take this raise and lower window requirement, you can see it has a customer requirement field. This is a reference field which points to 2 requirements from a different tracker. Since I have not yet imported this tracker, LemonTree.Connect creates placeholders in order to preserve the connection. If I check this and click on one of the elements and go to the traceability in EA on the top right side, you can see it depends on some placeholder elements. This is because I mapped the customer requirement link to a dependency. So in order to be consistent, LemonTree creates placeholders to have also the link information stored in Enterprise Architect. And if I import the customer requirements, these placeholders will get resolved. So I will do this here as a next step, importing the customer requirements first and initial import. So I have to configure the mapping as well. Take the same mapping template. I don't need to map any additional links, so I can save that. And after the import, you can see the placeholders are now gone because the placeholders have been replaced by the original elements. So here we now have the custom requirements imported and the system requirements. They now point to the real requirements, not the placeholders, because they are now available. As you can see, depends on window disable button. So here we see it points to the requirement in this package here. Next step will be the exports, and I'm going to show you the suspect linking and the delete detection then later on, because first I'm going to export, and once it's linked and exported, I will do some changes for the requirements and then synchronize this to Enterprise Architect to show you the impact. But at first, I want to export. So what I'm going to do is I will take this package, export it to Codebeamer. For this, I have a dedicated tracker architecture, which is currently empty. And this tracker will be filled with the elements from this package. So I'm going to start the export, or before I do that, I will show you the mapping because I already set this up here. For exporting elements, I want to export packages to folders, classes, and interfaces to tracker items. For the links, I mapped the dependency trace to the subject field. In fact, I want to change this, so I don't want to have the trace dependency. I want to have sysml satisfy, so I can update this. And for the diagrams, you can also control this, so which types of diagrams are exported. Here, for example, the class diagram type is mapped. I can also add specific diagrams like sysml, for example, sysml block definition. Or if I don't want to choose specific diagrams, so because I simply don't care and I want to have all diagrams exported, there is a default type, which is called any diagram. As the name says, any diagram will be exported. So if I don't want to control different diagram types, I can just say any diagram. So any diagram found in the structure for export will be exported. So I just changed this to block definition because I only want to have this. And then maybe let's also take the internal block diagram because I also have those diagrams. And for attributes, I can also map them, but for no name and nodes, I'm fine. And also, since we now have this diagram mapping enabled, what you can do is you can also export links from elements to the diagrams which represent them. So for example, if I export a class and this class is visible on a diagram, which is also exported, I can create a link or reference to the diagram that represents this element. And I have to configure this for the different element types. So for example, if I want to have a class that is represented on a diagram, I can set the diagram link field. So where in Codebeamer should the link to a diagram be stored? For example, in the subject field. And I can do this for each tracker item or for each element type individually. If I have multiple reference fields, I can control this, or I can create an own dedicated reference for storing the diagram references. So I'm going to save this and now start the export. You can also see here the progress indication is also improved. We now see a bit more details of the steps that are performed and how many steps are remaining. So you get a little better idea of how long it is expected to take. Now I switch to Codebeamer and do a refresh, and now we will see the created structure. And we can now see the elements that have been created along with the diagrams that I mapped. So this is not new. This was already possible, of course. If I now go to the elements here, in explaining the diagram links, I forgot to, of course, set up the traceability links, but that's not a problem. I can go back and just do an update. So of course, we want to see the traceability between the system architecture elements and the requirements. So what I will do is I will create links between some elements from the requirements and the architecture. So torque detection. So since I mapped the links to the satisfier links, so I will use the SysML toolbox and link the blocks from the architecture with the system requirements using the satisfy link. And now I'm going to export again. And this is necessary to do because otherwise I won't be able to show you the suspect feature. So this is why I have to do the export again. So now let me take a look in the system context, external actors. We now have, for example, this power disable trigger. This is an element from the system context that I just exported. If we now take a look in the subject field, we have two references. The first reference is the requirement, so the satisfy link that I just created. This points to the requirement. So this first reference basically means this connector here in Enterprise Architect. And the second link, it points to the PWC system context. This is the diagram where this element is visualized. So this relates to the diagram link that I configured also. So on one hand, I have the traceability to the requirements, and on the other hand, I have the link to all diagrams which visualize these elements. So if this is interesting, you can also map this and have this information represented on the Codebeamer side. And if I now do an update, so let's say there is a change in the requirements. So this performance requirement, it says the buttons have to work 100%, might be a little bit unrealistic. So I'm going to delete this. So I'm going to delete the tracker item. So performance requirement, we don't need this for now. And I take one of the requirements which are linked. So this power disable button, and I'm just going to update the description. Just say change here, and also maybe update the name so that we can immediately see that this will be updated. So we have now a deleted requirement and an updated requirement. So I will go back to Enterprise Architect. Then I go to the system requirements and import. We can now see one element will be changed. This is the updated one, and one element will be marked as deleted. And now if we take a look in the requirement structure, we can see on one hand, the update was successful because we see this change here, it's modified, and in the notes we see the change here. And if I take a look in the non-functional requirements, this performance requirement was deleted on Codebeamer side. So now it is flagged or marked as deleted with a stereotype. And this is also visible on diagrams because this stereotype has a red highlighting. So if you use the elements that are now deleted on diagrams, it will be quite prominent to see because they are highlighted in red. So this means it is not existing anymore in Codebeamer. So I have to do something with this requirement, either move it out of the package or delete it. So if it's deleted here, I can check, is it still linked to any other architecture elements? Currently, it's just owned by the parent. That's fine. So if it's not used anymore, I can safely delete it. I can do this manually in Enterprise Architect by just deleting the item, or I can also use the Codebeamer plugin and I can go to deleted elements and then delete elements from EA project. The idea is if you have multiple elements in Enterprise Architect and you want to delete them, then you can do this in one go. So you don't have to do this one by one. So if you have 10 elements which are deleted, then you don't have to do this one by one. So since I only have one, it would be okay to do it manually, but here I can do this with the menu. So continue to delete this, and now it is gone. And next time on import, of course, it will be consistent because in Codebeamer it's also missing. And the second thing that we imported was the update of the power disable button requirement. And this one is linked with this block from the system context. And now you can see it has a stereotype added, which is called suspected. And this suspected stereotype indicates that the linked requirement is modified. So by changing this, it might have an impact on the implementation. So I need to revisit this and check if I need to update the satisfy link or if I need to rework the architecture elements. And if I'm fine with this, so if I accept the change and I'm okay with the implementation, then I can get rid of the suspect flagging because it's not suspected anymore. So what I can do is I can either click on the link, on the diagram, or even on the package. And if I click this, I have a menu in the Codebeamer plugin, remove suspected flag from links. And then this will be done by LemonTree. Of course, I can also do this manually by going to the stereotype and then just getting rid of the stereotype, but you can do this for multiple suspected links also with the plugin. So you don't have to manually delete 10 stereotypes. So this can be done in one go using the plugin. So I think this was basically everything exciting that I can show you, which is new. I'm just checking again in the mapping if I forgot anything. Update mapping. Yeah, as I mentioned, the diagram link field is relates to the diagram usages, so this can be also visualized, and of course the different sections of the mapping, so element, link, and diagram. So that also means if you have existing mappings, you need to revisit them and change the mapping configuration because it's not now possible to map much more. So the links are now possible to map them individually. In the past, there was only one field for mapping and one rule to map in the user interface. And diagrams, they were just hard-coded, so it was not possible to control them. But this is now possible to create also dedicated mapping rules for each diagram type. You can use standard diagram types, so from UML, like class, component, and so on. You can also use SysML diagram types. We added them to the mapping UI as well, but you can also use extended diagram types. So if you have your own custom profile, like an MDG, for example, you can use base types like class and then add a custom diagram type. This works very similar for the elements with the stereotype. If you have an MDG and the diagram stereotype, then it would be something like this, diagram stereotype. So MDG, the colon is the typical delimiter, and then the diagram stereotype. This works for the diagrams if you have extended diagram types, and this also works for the elements, of course. If I have an element stereotype, if I have custom profiles, I can also add this here, or I can use the standard types or also SysML element types, for example. And also what is new, as you can see here, this is empty. is empty means that the mapping rule only accounts for elements without a stereotype. So for example, if I check this, it will only pick up classes without a stereotype. Why is this important? If I don't do this and I don't have this empty stereotype, it will pick up all classes with and without stereotype, because this is a generic rule that picks up all classes independent from the stereotype. If I map a stereotype like custom, it will only pick up classes with custom. But if I want to have a different rule for classes without, ignoring other elements with stereotypes, then I can use this is empty, and it will only pick up classes without a stereotype, and classes with a stereotype set, they will be not matched by this rule. So this basically enables you to control this in a much finer way, because if you have elements with stereotype, without stereotype, and with very specific stereotypes, it is possible to control this, basically giving you more freedom in configuration. So this, combined with the link mappings for multiple links and also for diagram mappings, enables much more flexibility to better control which data is transferred between Codebeamer and Enterprise Architect.